Well, Australia's universities have been told a controversial visa processing direction will soon be scrapped. Ministerial Direction 107 directed officials to prioritise the visas of low-risk students, which ultimately resulted in the processing of students at prestigious universities being fast-tracked, while it was slowed for those at smaller universities. For more on this, I'm joined now by Phil Honeywood, who's the CEO of the International Education Association of Australia. Phil, thanks so much for your time. Just for context, can you explain to us how much universities really rely on international students to stay afloat?
Well, anything from a third to a half of their revenue is being generated by international students who pay at least 3 times more than a domestic student would for the same degree. And it's really been a devil's compact over many years by different governments that have turned a blind eye to the fact that the universities don't get funded at anything like OECD average. And so therefore the universities in Australia have had to rely for research funding, for new buildings on campus, and for subsidisation of domestic students from off the back of the overseas student intake.
So can you take us through this decision today, what it means and how it reverses the previous ministerial direction, which meant that, you know, students from bigger universities were being fast-tracked?
What we've now got is a situation in which every provider, be they a high-ranked university or a regional university or a quality private provider, will be treated the same when it comes to visa processing time. The previous ministerial direction gave priority to really Group of 8 and Level 1 colleges who would only take about 8 weeks on average for their visa to be processed, and the others had to wait up to 3 months for an individual student to have their visa processed by our Home Affairs Department. So happily, everybody's going to be treated the same for processing time. However, the higher risk colleges will still have an additional filter of financial and academic record checks to ensure that the type of students that they're wanting to bring to Australia are indeed appropriate and quality student.
Yeah, can you explain what it means by low risk and high risk visa applications?
It's a fairly blunt instrument. It looks at the academic record of each institution. It looks at which countries they're recruiting from, and this is a very blunt instrument because it gives preference to a low risk country such as China over countries like India and Nepal by a formula the Home Affairs Department have used. Now, that's partly because there might be more visa overstays from certain countries, but it's really not an ideal formula and hasn't worked properly in the past. So at least we're not going to have a situation in which we only have students from one country getting preference over students from a diversity of countries, which is what multicultural Australia should be all about.
This change today is something that the sector has been pushing for. How has it been received?
Importantly, the government did have a stakeholder group that it met with of technical experts on admissions criteria, and they've been meeting for 2 months. So the sector can't say that we have not had input into the co-design of this ministerial direction. So we're quite pleased that we've had, on the one hand, the input. Clearly, the government, though, have a political imperative to keep the same caps that they wanted to legislate at the same level of 270,000 new students, and the opposition obviously suggesting they're going to have a much stricter figure. So the government were caught between a rock and a hard place when the bill in Parliament didn't pass. They've in effect put the same cap in place for next year of 270,000 students via a different mechanism.